see. My last case opened in me a new fear, a real fear, a fear of myself, of what I am, and of what I've always been. All that I was is now lost. Hope, purpose, pleasure, all meaningless. I now walk in the shadows between worlds, and it is there I have finally glimpsed upon what lives in the dark corners of the earth.
I'm sure we could all name something that scared us when we were kids, like Herobrine, Five Nights at Freddy's, or Jeff the Killer, but if you ever played a straight horror game when you were young, that would definitely get under your skin more, especially when you're a kid. Some popular examples I could think of are games like Silent Hill or Resident Evil, but from personal experience, there's a game that sits in the corner of my mind, it being the first horror game I could ever recall playing. As the name suggests, the game follows the Cthulhu mythos, created by H.P. Lovecraft in 1928. This game loosely follows one of Lovecraft's novels in the Cthulhu mythos, called The Shadow over Innsmouth. This game has been on my mind for years now, and for the past few months, I've wanted to make a video on it. This game, like the novel, follows a detective investigating a mysterious seaport town for a missing person, only to realize the town has a dark and grimy secret. This game's aesthetic has been one that's stuck with me for ages, with its dilapidated surroundings and isolated atmosphere. This game does an amazing job of making you feel completely clueless, just like our protagonist, private investigator Jack Walters. You're barely given any information through the gameplay, most of the story being revealed via letters, textbooks, notebooks, all that kind of stuff scattered throughout the game. However, the game opens with Jack in his cell in Arkham Mental Asylum, with Jack giving a monologue on his last case, before taking his own life. We're then taken back to see what led Jack to this complete level of hopelessness. The game cuts to 6.5 years prior, where Jack is called out to assist officers with a strange cult, where a man by the name of Victor Holt has specifically requested to see Jack. It's at this point I want to mention the bugs I encountered while trying to get the footage for this game, specifically on the intro mission. This crash that happens on the intro mission happens regularly throughout the game, unless you launch it in 16 by 900 and 60 Hz. Just a little warning if you decide to check the game out for yourself. Moving on, as Jack walks towards the house, he sees an officer trying to negotiate with one of the cult members. It fails, and the cultist shoots the police officer right in front of Jack. In this moment of shock, Jack's vision goes red and shaky. After he quickly composes himself, he makes his way through the back entrance of the house and finds 2 rooms. One is not so interesting, only holding an old stove and some rats, while across the hall is a more interesting looking room, what seems to be a meeting room for the cult members, and at the end of the room is an altar with some religious scripture about Yithians, which are an intelligent life form in the Cthulhu mythos, and considered the superior race to humans. The scripture further goes into detail about the subordinates of humans, and how they are inferior creatures, and are lucky to even have limited lifespans gifted to them by the Yithians. As you move away from the room, you find a strange symbol that Jack describes as an eye. Going up to the symbol and interacting with it, you'll be able to save your game. Attempting to interact with any other doors downstairs, you'll find they're all locked. You'll only be able to proceed upstairs for now. Going up, you'll mostly find locked rooms with the exception of 2. The first one has a dying man ominously eager to meet Jack before passing away due to bleeding out, whilst in the other room, a cultist is about to greet Jack by name, but midway through gets shot by an officer outside, which leads to Jack giving the most calm reaction to watching someone get shot in the head.
Damn, he recognized me. And it sounded like he was going to get on the level with what's going on in this joint.
Wow!
Avoiding the window and grabbing the key on the chair, you'll be able to proceed downstairs and enter an office filled with pictures of Jack spread all throughout the room, and a chalkboard having not only more photos, but seemingly every part of Jack's day-to-day life. Grabbing the key on the desk and making your way out of the room, you can move to a room across the hall. You'll find the cult's small library. You'll hear someone grunting through the wall, and as you make your way around the shelf, at the end of the room you'll see a mirror. Going up to it, you'll be able to turn right and open a trapdoor to the basement. Moving downstairs, you'll avoid rotting wood collapsing in on you until you find a metal door which leads to a small mortuary littered with dead bodies, shelves of chemicals. Continuing, you'll find a man strapped to a wall, living with all of his organs kept far apart, preserved in tanks. After some short investigation in the room, you'll move to the body and find a green crystal in the middle, too hot to touch, and a glowing green panel, which after interacting with... The man dies, the machine keeping him alive, now overridden, and the crystal next to him is now able to be picked up. Moving around the room, and heading through the door to your left as you entered, leads to a door with another crystal, one that you can't pick up, and another green panel. Touching it, you'll find a large room. It resembles a chapel, with huge green crystals hanging from the roof. A large well in the center. Looking around the well, you'll see a slot similar to the one holding the green crystal. Placing it from the upstairs slot, there's a panel on the other side, which will now be glowing, and with nothing else to do, you have no choice but to touch it. The cutscene plays where the room will lock, and large portal will open up, with two huge, strange things coming out. In a state of fright and an inability to comprehend, Jack passes out, later being found by officers and taken to safety. We cut to 6 years later. Jack is still suffering from trauma from that night, specifically acute amnesia. After colleagues admitted Jack to Arkham, he was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia, but after proving his lack of harm to himself and others, was allowed to return to work. Jack recounts that exactly 6 years after entering the house, he snapped out of his psychosis. He was himself again. The past 6 years feeling, according to him, like a second personality, disconnected from himself. As Jack writes in his diary about dreams of cosmic worlds, he gets a call from a man named Arthur Anderson about a missing person named Brian Burnham, who disappeared from his grocery store he ran in Innsmouth, a small seaport fishing town. With no other cases to work on, Jack decides to catch a bus from a resident of Innsmouth. As Jack is being taken into the town by the bus driver, Joe Sargent, we get a little inside information on the town, its independence, and how they dislike outsiders. Joe drops Jack off at the Gilman Hotel, where Jack begins his investigation on the disappearance of Brian Burnham. After arriving in Innsmouth, I tried checking into the hotel, where I was promptly told none of the rooms were available, as they were being cleaned because thems from out of town leave a horrid mess. After a short investigation upstairs and being told to quit snooping, I left the hotel to question some locals on Brian Burnham. I began by questioning the bus driver, Joe Sargent, where I was given absolutely nothing to work with. As I moved through the town square and tried asking more locals, I was only met with antagonizing remarks or nothing at all. The older citizens of Innsmouth also bear very strange appearances. They all look slightly decayed, like bloated dead bodies, and sound like they've been smoking a pack a day for the last 50 years. The only normal citizens I was able to find were surprisingly even more odd. One of them just straight up said to me that he couldn't be seen talking to me, and the other was seen crying outside of a building called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Taking a look around the streets of Innsmouth, the town's grimy and dilapidated appearance, in combination with the judgmental citizens, really helps with making the player feel completely isolated. You not only feel unwanted by the townsfolk, but also feel a looming presence as if you're not meant to be there in the first place. Continuing through the town trying to find people to ask questions, you meet a strange woman who warns us to finish our business in the town and leave. Continuing back the way I came, I turned down an alley and met with the weird town drunk named Zadok Allen, who reckons Brian Burnham was killed for being an outsider and promises us more information if we bring him some whiskey. Going back to the town square, I met Constable Nathan Birch, guarding a blocked off area, and yet again, I was not given any information on the disappearance of Brian Burnham. So with no other option, we wait for Birch to patrol around the blocked off area where we can sneak past him into the shop that Brian Burnham owned. We use a shelf to block off the door to the entranceway, where we're able to sneak into the shop and start looking around. In here, we're able to find a med kit, which we can use to heal in case we take damage. Looking around the store, there's not much of interest until we find a wooden crank and a bottle of whiskey, which after grabbing, Constable Birch will start trying to enter the building, which, if you don't know where to use the wooden crank and jump down the hole in time, you'll get caught super quickly. Falling down into the store's cellar, you won't find anything other than a movable ladder, which after pushing into a wall, it'll break and reveal an underground cellar with a few skeletons, and from Jack's observation, we learn that there was a fire. Heading up from the cellar, there's a photo room with faded pictures of old Innsmouth. Continuing up another flight of stairs, we find a spiderweb infested room with a single clip of .45 ACP ammo. And one note that I want to make about this is that I love when horror games do this. Weapon in games usually feel like a triumphant step in your journey, but in horror games, it's the complete opposite. because getting a weapon in a horror game implies you'll need to eventually use it. And in this game, I love the fact that you're only given ammo. I think it really helps build up the tense nature of the game, similar to the medkit that you find in the store. I remember when I was actually playing this game and I was genuinely starting to dread what I'd eventually need to use this ammo on. Continuing the search, we only find news snippets of old Innsmouth dating back to the mid-19th century. Once leaving through one of the unlocked doors, we can find a woman hanging from the ceiling, seemingly died a few months back. Her body just left to decay in this abandoned building. Going back through the store and heading out of the other door, we learn about one of the game's mechanics, that being doors that have latches on them. Again, I love that the game is introducing these mechanics to us slowly. Learning about this mechanic at seemingly random helps build the game's tension, knowing that it's going to come in use later on. After leaving the building and going to head back to Zadok, we're interrupted by a man named Lucas Mackey, a government official inspecting Innsmouth. He's here to look at the Marsh Refinery and meet the manager, Jacob Marsh. Whilst having our investigation interrupted, Jack gets one of many strange visions in which he sees a strange creature creeping on top of the rooftops in town square. Going back to Zadok and giving him the bottle of whiskey, he sips on it while telling us about Innsmouth and how a man, Captain Obed, told the desperate residents of Innsmouth that they should seek out better gods that would answer their prayers. And while many of the religious citizens of Innsmouth were against Obed's preachings, a group of Obed's group and the religious folk of the town went out to the reefs, shots were fired, and the next day, Obed and 30 of his followers were sent to prison. And afterwards, the outsiders reported hearing sounds of rioting, shooting, and screaming all across the town square, and bodies were carelessly thrown in jail. The next day, the mess was all cleaned. Obed and his cult had taken over Innsmouth and warned everyone left to stay shy of strangers. However, the gods Obed worshipped wanted more than sacrifices. They wanted them to take the oaths of Dagon, and Zadok tells us to head over through Dock Street and we're given a key to the town's poorhouse. Going to the town square, again, we're met by the strange woman who needs to talk to us in secret. Jack demands to know her name. It's Rebecca Lawrence, and unless we want to join the list of missing people in Innsmouth, we need to follow her to a secluded area, and we're given a lead into finding Brian Burnham. We're told to talk to his ex, Ruth Billingham, but before we can ask more questions, we're rushed to move to a secluded spot. Rachel tells us more about the strange symbols her father discovered while studying old manuscripts, a sign that ward offs unusual elements in Innsmouth, and that the symbols will offer a moment of sanctuary, the same symbol we've seen, except this time it's surrounded by a star. Saving and going to town square, we get another one of Jack's visions of this strange creature crawling along the Innsmouth rooftops. We finally make our way back to town square and move into the poorhouse, loading into the next stage of the game. Moving through the Innsmouth poorhouse, we enter Dock Street, and seeing a woman being yelled at by another raspy-voiced citizen. Just like every other person in this town, she's asked to be left alone. Making your way into the actual poorhouse, Jack has another vision of the strange creature. After snapping back, he speaks to one of the poorhouse residents in order to find out how to get to Dock Street. After speaking to him, you can continue through the poorhouse, in which you'll find bug-infested rooms and sick people. Notably, you can find a week-old dead body of a woman. Jack's vision begins to blur in shock before we're able to exit the poorhouse, climb down a ladder, and finally enter Dock Street. Moving through Dock Street, we can find a disturbing crime scene with 2 dead bodies and blood splattered everywhere. Jack's vision once again goes blurry before we move back to the homes in Dock Street. We find a house that we can knock on the door of, and we're met with a young girl named Ramona. We ask if we can talk to either her mother or her father, and we're told that her mother is locked in the attic because she bites, and that her father will return home soon. With the time we've got, you're able to explore the home, first seeing Ramona drawing strange depictions of her mother. Going upstairs is a photograph of the family, with the mother's side torn out. Continuing upstairs into the attic, we peek inside, where we get jump scared by a strange monster. It crashes through the door, running downstairs, and we can only hear the beast attacking Ramona, killing her. We head downstairs and find her father, cradling her body. We're told to grab a book from upstairs before he's grabbed by Elliot Ropes and Nathan Birch. I left the house as I already had grabbed the book earlier, and we meet back up with Rebecca and relay the attack to her. She tells us that Thomas will be hanged for his accused crime. We're brought back to the town square and tasked to find Thomas's store to grab the Book of Dagon from his safe. Finding Thomas's store, we find a woman trying to open the safe. We find out that she's actually Brian Burnham's girlfriend, Ruth Billingham. We question her and inform her about Thomas. She blames herself for everything that's happened to Brian and Thomas, and begs Jack to help her and meet up with her later. In the book Thomas had, it says that the safe code is the date and time that Ramona was born. So after a quick Google search, you open the safe and you'll find the Book of Dagon. a manuscript that tells the story of a god named Dagon, who is a god among the underwater race known as the Deep Ones. The book also entails details of sacrificial practice, magic, and strange rituals, with the last few chapters of the book yet to be finished. After an admittedly long day of detective work, Jack heads back to the Gilman Hotel for some much needed rest. Before entering, however, he eavesdrops on the bus driver Joe Sargent and the hotel keeper Charles Gilman talking about Thomas Waite, and Joe tells us that he has orders from the Order to ensure Jack doesn't leave, and Charles eerily expects Jack to ask for a room. After Joe leaves, Jack goes up to the counter and orders a room. Whilst doing so, Jack has yet another vision of Charles, leaving a key next to his shelf, and then a strange beast crawling atop the buildings around Innsmouth. Snapping back, Charles is asked to speak alone with Constable Birch. After he leaves, we grab the key and head into his office, finding organs in jars, blood, and guts spilled all across the room. With little time to investigate, we grab the logbook and leave the office, and Charles takes us to our room. Along the way, he talks about Thomas and how he'll be lynched for his accused crime. We get brought to our room, and as Charles leaves, we get yet another vision of him, this time attacking a woman with a cleaver. Before laying to rest, we have to close the latches to the 2 entrance points to the room. After we fall asleep, a mysterious voice speaks to Jack in his dream of a cosmic room surrounded by Yithians, and Jack is told that in time, he will learn of his true purpose. Whilst Jack is asleep, Charles and some other locals begin to make their way to Jack's room in an attempt to attack him. Jack wakes to the locals trying to open his door with a key. Realizing it's locked due to the latches, they attempt to break the door down. Now this segment of the game is one of my favourites. Jack gets up in a hazy state and books it through the connected room. All the while, the game forces you to look back and meticulously lock every latch as you pass through the doors in the hotel. That, in combination with the doors being blocked by wardrobes that take ages to push out of the way, puts an immense amount of pressure on you, but it is always important to remain calm in a stressful scenario. Despite this segment being a lot of trial and error, it didn't stop me from being scared. That's what I love most about this chase. No matter how many attempts I had, I was still extremely terrified because of the slow-moving cabinets and needing to stop in your tracks to prevent the locals from attacking you. It makes you stress to such a high degree. However, one of my main gripes with this part is the jumps that you have to make between the alleyways to other balconies. The distance needed to cover, combined with Jack's very short jump distance, makes this form of traversal really hard to complete, and led to me getting a little bit upset.
Why did I not make that jump?
But eventually jumping across the gap and avoiding gunshots made from across the building to you and continuing, you'll make your way through a room with a strange fish-human hybrid yelling and screaming on the bed. This is another great addition to the chase. This fish-man thing stands out so much and catches you so off guard, but despite seeing it, your instincts just tell you to keep going and keep pushing forward. Eventually, you'll escape the building and climb up to a warehouse rooftop. As you descend into the warehouse, you see many locals carrying guns and being on the lookout for Jack, and we're forced to commit to being stealthy and sneaking past everyone in the town. I love this change of pace. Being forced to play stealthily after a tense chase forces you to stay on your toes and gives you very little room to relax. This section does wonders for doing that, with armed citizens all around the warehouse in awkward positions that forces you to sneak right past them, and if just one of them sees you, they'll alert the others and will chase you down. And with little space to hide, you'll die very quickly. I personally suck at stealth games or stealth segments in video games, so of course I didn't do very well during this segment, getting shot at as I re-climbed the warehouse rooftop and made my way into another part of the warehouse, now being forced to sneak under that warehouse's floorboards, surrounded by rats. And in this moment, that's exactly what you feel like, a rat in a maze, unable to escape. This is also where my friends decided to dogpile on my already existing paranoia.
Oh my.
After leaving the floorboards, we catch a quick glimpse at our next opening. However, it's surrounded by the town's armed locals, and again, I suck at stealth, so I got caught fairly quickly, my game crashed, and once again on my second attempt, I finally made it outside. However, due to the panic and confusion from the chase earlier, and the fact the citizens of Innsmouth are all patrolling the streets, I died again. This segment is amazing. You just feel so isolated and alone. The town's layout feels completely alien to you. To put it bluntly, you're lost. In a town you don't know, filled with a strange cult who don't want you there. You are alone, and that feeling is awful, and it really starts to show through this segment. This part also builds tension due to its pacing. This part of the game is extremely long, with you needing to move carefully around the residents of Innsmouth, And because of that, and the lack of save points, this lingering idea in your mind that once you're caught, you have to go all the way back is constantly chewing at you. One quick annoyance I have with this game is the fact that on the PC version, the S key is the interact button, meaning you'll try and escape by sneaking backwards, only to halt in your steps and potentially die. But there is also a chance that that was intentional, telling players to trust their instincts and to keep on moving, to not look back. Finally, on my third attempt, I just barely made it to the next segment as I got chased into a dilapidated building, where I heard a crash. As soon as I run in, I see a man dead atop of a symbol of Dagon. Jack does get some help from a younger, cleaner voiced, and most importantly, unarmed Innsmouth citizen. We get told that the sewers are a potentially safe spot. We do get a few more leads on the strange going-ons in the town, but with no time to waste, the town citizens are still hot on our trail. We waste no time making our way down to the sewers. We hear the ghostly cries of a young girl, and looking down a locked-off tunnel, it's Ramona, still bloodied, and she runs out of our line of sight. We continue through the sewers, and her distorted voice echoes throughout the sewer, sadly recounting her pain and the events from her attack from her mother, and the occasional call-out for her father. We move further down, finding a corrosive, swampy, moss-like substance that damages you when you touch it. Heading up a set of stairs, you find a rotting corpse. It seems whatever or whoever this is, he was trying to escape something. Some noises deeper into the sewers only confirm that. Saving and heading deeper in, we find a tiny water filtration station with a tank of slimy water and a pipe that leads out of the sewer. However, Jack refuses to enter the slimy waters, leaving us to interact with Valve so that we can drain the water and safely escape. Again, thank you Google for telling me how to figure this out. So after draining the water and climbing through the tunnel, we find ourselves in what I think is a large water tower station, I'm not 100% sure, with a large destroyed grate in the middle. Skeletons surround the outside of it, and in the center of the grate lies the body of the town drunk, Zadok Allen. From the way it looks, he was executed for giving us information, with bugs now surrounding his corpse. After a short hallucination, a bunch of large tentacles come up from the grate, carry his body away. Now, being a little shaken up, oh, that just scared the fuck out of me. And with no other exit besides a singular ladder, we begin to climb. Along the way, seeing many, many dead bodies, all of which are traitors of the Order, heathens to Dagon, all of which were punished for the act of blasphemy. Going through a small room, we take a ladder back down into the depths of the sewer, once again seeing illusions of Ramona, hearing her ghostly cries as we make our way through the sewer. Eventually, we find a very large and open tunnel, covered in the same corrosive moss we found earlier. It's very clear we have little time to get out of here, especially with these spiders, which are about the size of the smallest Australian spider, who, as well as scaring the shit out of me, killed me a handful of times. Because Jack takes damage from anything from a shotgun pellet hitting him to falling from a 4cm drop, it's very easy to die, especially with the fact that when you get damaged, you slow down, I assume because of limb damage, which Fallout would shamelessly steal 8 years prior. Finally, after making it through, we find a series of ladders. One of them is opened at the top, and others further down have loose grates, which when trying to climb, shakes them. It's very simple, but I like this puzzle of needing to move each grate to lure away the two Innsmouth residents before booking it to the open ladder and sneaking past. After doing so, you make your way into a burning warehouse. The town is burning as we attempt to escape. This only fuels worry, as it's clear to see the level of desperation the citizens are at with trying to find Jack, even destroying buildings with the means of finding him and killing him, almost as if they're trying to stop us from finding something. After making our way out of the warehouse, I want to point out again how amazing this game is at making the player feel like a rat in a maze. Either I was too panicked or too dumb to notice, but past the initial attack of the citizens in the Gilman Hotel and the town square we saw at the start of the game, I was never able to get a grasp on the town's layout. I never knew where I was going, where I would end up. You are a hunted outsider. You have no choice but to keep running, hiding in the shadows, in a desperate attempt to escape. The town feels so dead, so liminal, and almost endless. I also noticed, while looking back on the footage I got for this video, I would always turn back on doors to close them, trying to create a tiny bit of distance between myself and the town's citizens. After making our way into this building, I find, I don't know, the 400th fucking pistol magazine, and I was genuinely starting to get desperate for anything to defend myself with. We walk through what seems to be a house, walking into an office, and so very gratefully seeing Rebecca again. She fills us in on some info with Brian, telling us that he is being held in the town's jail until he's needed to be sacrificed to Dagon. Jack plays this off like it's just some fisher tale, as if he didn't see a bunch of tentacles emerge from a grate to eat the corpse of a man 15 minutes ago. Rebecca does give us some good information on how to get to the jail Brian is being held in. She tells us we need to head through the bank and the water tower, but first we need to go through the church's tunnels of which were built by her father, who was also the town's minister and was unfortunately killed by the Order for not pledging himself to Dagon. Rebecca hands us a small postcard, and we get shot at by more armed citizens. We absolutely book it to the church, making a run for it. Right as Rebecca unlocks the church doors, she is shot. The one person who was actually helping us shot mercilessly. But there's no time to grieve, especially with townsfolk closing in. We head inside the church, finding the minister strung up. I was curious looking back on the footage if this was meant to be Rebecca's father, but I'm not 100% sure if I can confirm. The postcard Rebecca gave us tells us to play the church bells from the lowest hanging bell to the highest, which opens a small hatch in the corner of the church, allowing us to enter a crypt. As we make our way through the church tunnels, we find coffins in a small room with a safe, news clippings from the 1840s with the year 1846 circled many times. On a pedestal, we find a book, Registry of Births, Deaths, and Marriages in Innsmouth, as well as a stone plaque under the book with seemingly random numbers. Going through the registry, it makes a lot more sense why the news clippings had 1846 circled so much. In the registry, the years 1844 and 1845 are simple: a few deaths, couple of marriages, and some births. However, in 1846, there was a staggering 243 deaths due to disturbances and the epidemic. Assumingly, this is the purging Zadok Allen told us about, the culling of every Innsmouth resident who didn't turn their lives to Dagon and the Order. 1847 seemingly returns to normal, the few usual deaths and births, weirdly with 0 marriages at all, and all 7 babies that were born in 1847 weren't baptized. The last pages covers 1848 and 1849. Both are even more cryptic. 0 marriages, births are simply a guessing game, with again, no baptisms. Even the deaths are somewhat guessed. Turning back to the plaque and opening up our inventory, we look back at the postcard Rebecca gave us, which has 4 handmade holes. Placing it over the plaque, we find the combination for the safe. Opening the safe, we find a stone cross. Heading deeper into the tunnels, we find a dead end. However, there is a coffin with an upside down cutout of a cross. Placing the cross in and turning it allows us to crawl through. After crawling through the sewer for the fucking 40th time, we hear Ramona's laughter and find 2 tunnels we can head down. As we do, Jack has another vision. This one is much more vivid, giving us a chance to walk through the asylum he ends up getting locked in. We walk down the halls, chasing a figure of Jack as a patient. The camera shakes violently. It is very clear now that Jack's mental state is beginning to falter. We find a ladder and begin to climb, slipping past a few more armed residents into the bank. Climbing up the bank's destroyed scaffolding, we're able to climb up some stairs and navigate the second floor across unstable planks, burning wood, and the biggest villain of this whole section, the shaky camera, which shakes so bad, I feel like Helen Keller would have a better time climbing across. After making our way through though, we reach the top floor and need to make a leap of faith. Again, with the game's jank platforming, either you need to make the jump last second or you haven't healed, meaning Jack is injured and therefore moves slower. After making the jump though, we find the water tower, needing to jump across balconies, climb ladders, just to walk through it. We then climb through more buildings and on top of rooftops to enter another building. We meet up again with Lucas Mackey, who again tells us where Brian is. We dig for more information on the Order, and we're only reinforced on our own idea. They control politics, law, business, and religion in Innsmouth. However, we're also told of a man named Robert Marsh, who seems to be the one on top. However, no one born outside of Innsmouth has seen him in decades. According to Mackey, Marsh is shrouded in mystery and danger. Finally, after our little chat and catch up, we climb through the window, set on our way to break Brian Burnham out of jail, and hopefully get him and ourselves out of Innsmouth. It's at this point in the game, about a third of the way in, that I have just completely hit a brick wall. The Steam version of Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth has just completely stopped working on me. Thankfully, due to other means, I was able to not only finish this playthrough, but also get this video done. We follow behind Officer Elliot Ropes, and we overhear a conversation between him and Constable Nathan Birch, talking about the sacrifices they have locked up in the cells. We also hear that the police chief is not helping search for the outsider due to his inability to shut his eyes. We find a crowbar and Brian Burnham in one of the cells. There's also a crazed man in the neighbouring cell, which after attempting to talk to him, he'll alert Elliot Ropes, leading him to leave the jail back door briefly opened and allowing us to slip in. We make our way upstairs, and just outside of the police chief's room, we hear him talking about burning skin. Going down the hall, we find a bathroom. The sink and the bathtub seem to be filled with what looks like human flesh. Fiddling with the pipes in the bathroom, we cut off the water supply to the police chief's sink, forcing him to come into the bathroom we're in. We sneak past him and into his bedroom, where we grab the cell keys. Making our way back to Brian, he says he'll only come with us when he trusts us, so we show him the photo that Ruth gave us. He then mentions a car in a shed that should get us out of Innsmouth. After breaking him out, he leads us to the shed, but it's locked, and it's missing its handle, leading us to take Brian down to the sewers. I completely messed up at this bit. Cops surrounded the streets, because I alerted them, and it left it unsafe for Brian to follow, which led to me breaking back into the jail and stealing a police whistle, which can distract residents and police officers. But who really cares about that? Because now, we have a goddamn shotgun and pistol. Unfortunately, like an absolute imbecile, I completely forgot to record this bit, including me accidentally using the whistle, killing 3 Innsmouth residents with a shotgun and a pistol, and then beating another one to death with a crowbar, and also me leading Brian through the sewers. But anyway, we make our way through the sewers, and after climbing into the shed with Brian, we catch up with Lucas Mackey, where we learn he's working with the FBI, a part of the American Treasury. Brian asks us to grab something from the police safe, which led to me randomly putting codes in, as well as murdering a few citizens. I got the thing that belonged to Ruth, seeing a vision of a strange lizard hand, placing it in the safe. I returned to Brian, killing a few more citizens on the way in self-defense, and after returning, he's got the truck running, and I could not be more blessed to be told that the truck has more ammo in the back. Good luck, Innsmouth. May your God have mercy on your souls, because I certainly fucking won't. Brian drives while I shoot from the bed of the truck. I do a pretty piss poor job, but we make it nonetheless. Now we have to save Ruth, and when we jump out of the bed of the truck, we find our new best friend, the revolver. We see a vision of Ruth hiding in this dock warehouse. Thankfully, we don't need to use stealth, which means... Oh look, more ammo. We end up finding Ruth, and before we can save her, a bunch of Innsmouth residents storm in. We get spotted and we're forced to fight them off. After a couple of fails, I caved and decided to use my Tommy gun, mowing all of them down. We save Ruth by climbing over the rafters, but because of Jack's fear of heights and the citizens shooting us, this did not make this easy at all. We end up saving Ruth and help her escape, driving away with Brian and getting into a crash, where Jack has vivid visions in the asylum and Thomas holding Ramona's corpse. We talk to a federal agent, J. Edgar Hooper, who interrogates us on our business in Innsmouth. After sparing some details, we receive a little bit of electroshock therapy from the doctor. Jack finally caves and gives information. We hallucinate a ghost of Ramona and bugs crawling around the room, and after being given some more drugs, we confess our true intentions of why we were in Innsmouth. We get told about the Fed's plan to raid Innsmouth, specifically the Marsh Refinery, and that we need to help them. We get driven to the Marsh Refinery and now need to capture Jacob Marsh alive. We see federal agent after federal agent pulling up to the Marsh Refinery. As the agents conduct their raid, we see a vision of a mounted LMG behind a shed door, eventually being revealed to be the same shed door that they are standing right in front of. We see a bunch of federal agents get mowed down, and we're now forced to jump right into the chaos and help conduct the raid on the Marsh Refinery. We duck past the oncoming fire from the turret to make our way over to Hooper, who tells us to get closer to the shooter, while the other agents give us some cover fire. Unfortunately, Hoover only left us with our pistol. Not to fear though, as ambushing the shooter and taking him down is not a difficult task. We catch up with the agents who, after breaking into the refinery, we now upgrade our arsenal, adding back the shotgun, as well as adding a new addition, the hunting rifle. We see a very brief vision of someone in a large industrial elevator and make our way into the warehouse, taking some time to gather our surroundings before catching up with Hoover. Heading downstairs to the shipping area, we hear cries of agony. Once reached, finding pipes spewing steam as a corpse lies on the ground, clearly burnt alive by said steam. With the corridors blocked with steam, we make our way over to Hoover at the elevators, where we see him helping an injured agent in a state of terror and anguish before mercy killing him. Hoover tells us to head downstairs since the elevator is down, so after a little more exploration, I make my way down into the depths of the Marsh Refinery. Exploring the underground of the refinery is like a maze entrapped with many refinery workers, armed and dangerous. We end up finding a drive belt in the refinery's workshop, and after barely scraping by, we find the generator room, where after clearing out some more refinery workers, reattaching it to the elevator's mechanics. We retrace through the refinery, and after getting the elevators restored, we reactivate them, and we're now able to jump in one of the lifts and make our way further into the refinery. I'm going to waffle on a little bit while this time-lapse plays because I completely missed my stop like a dumbass, and the fact is, these lifts move slow as fuck. Taking nearly 5 minutes to go full circle. After finally reaching our destination, we release some pressure valves, rerouting the steam, finally allowing ourselves to return to the steam-burned corpse, and make our way down past to the previously closed-off smelting area, where of course we gun down some more refinery workers, before finding a long stretching conveyor belt, which as we head down, we catch a glimpse from the perspective of Agent Nelson being thrown into a meat grinder. Moving down the conveyor, that's exactly what we find as chunks of body parts and blood spew from the bottom of the grinder. Making our way to the top part of the conveyor, we walk down the belt again. We catch another vision of Jack in the asylum, with blood pouring through the walls and what looks like tentacles at the end of the corridor. After making our way down the conveyor, we finally meet Jacob Marsh, who quickly turns on the belt, sending us careening towards the meat grinder, forcing us to jump and avoid certain death. After the meat grinder is jammed, we make our way back to catch Jacob Marsh. Now back where we started in the refinery, the platform walkway below us breaks and we're now swarmed by refinery workers who we must fend off against. After doing so, we make our way into the office of Jacob Marsh and find a letter from his father, Sebastian Marsh. My dear family, I expect to return home shortly. I look forward to seeing you all again. I believe my trip has been a fruitful one. I've met with many potential buyers for our product, and as I predicted, met with a few concerns. All are aware that history is written by the victor, and that treaties and laws must bow to the fact of conquest, and what, indeed, is so moral about a bullet or a bomb that sets them above other means of death. I shall speak to you all further upon my return. I shall have much to say to Robert in particular. It is of the utmost importance that our personal beliefs and agendas remain subordinate to the overall good of the family and the town. As the time draws ever closer, it becomes more imperative that we act as one. If he is unwilling to do so, he must be compelled, for all our sakes. In particular, he must remove his beast to another part of the refinery without delay. My love and blessings are upon you all. Aya Dagon, Aya Hydra, Aya, Sebastian. After making our way back to the now working elevator, we plunge ourselves to the farthest depths of the refinery. Now at the bottom floor, we fight past more workers, finding Jacob Marsh holding Hooper captive in a cage suspended above molten gold. We shoot Marsh, making him flee, and quickly go to save Hooper, where we're now forced to give chase to Marsh. This section of the refinery is honestly very tense. You run around like a lost dog, occasionally seeing visions of this strange creature hot on your trail. That, in combination with the absent refinery workers, constantly builds tension as you're so used to them just popping out of corners. Finally, after enough crawling, reaching a deep part of the refinery and this mysterious creature hot on our tail, we head through a door where we're knocked out by Marsh, who wants us to witness the power of Dagon before chanting, Aya Dagon, Aya Hydra. We slip back into unconsciousness, and after coming to, we see this strange beast, tall growth made of what looks like the same substance we saw back in the Innsmouth sewers, with multiple large eyes and tendrils with teeth protruding from it, ready to attack. With a broken fuse on the main bat control, we need to find a replacement. We hide from the beast's line of sight, allowing us to slip past its large, slamming tentacles. After crawling past, we reach a vat pump, where in between its strikes, we activate the pump, sending the beast's lower half flushed away. We reascend to the top control station, and with the beast's second half gone, we can traverse the back end of the top floor, finding an office with a fresh fuse. Returning to the main control and inserting the fuse, we activate the vat completely, sending the creature to the furthest depths of the refinery, far beyond what was advertised in the elevators. As we make our way back to the elevator, the strange growth, the corrosive living substance spews out, chasing us. This part is very tricky because if your timing is just a little bit off at the start, you will die. We barely make our way back to the elevator, taking it back up to the ground floor, but before it reaches, the growth seems to grab the elevator, pulling it down. We hit the emergency release and climb out as we hear the elevator careen to the ground floor. We catch up with Hoover, the surviving agents, and a captured Jacob Marsh. Hoover tells us about a key Marsh was hesitant to give up, a key that gives access to a hidden room on a secret floor in the refinery. Not only that, but Hoover's remaining agents have rigged bombs all over the refinery, and Hoover wants us to investigate the hidden floor before the whole place is blown to smithereens. Jack takes the maintenance elevator hatch, where we make the long descent to the deepest part of the refinery, finding it covered in the corrosive material and gold bars with an oddish white colour. Once entering, we realize that this floor is a vault for all of this strange gold. Not only that, but the abundance of corrosive material prevents us from reaching one of the two metal shutters. We make our way through the other door, and as we travel through, we find the beast blocking the aforementioned other door and preventing us from doing a thorough investigation of what's down here. This specific part of the refinery is a lot more based around exploration and needing to keep track of where you're going. 4 valves that reroute the steam, only one of which has a turning wheel on it, leaving us to find a wrench so that we can reroute all of the steam and neutralize the beast, allowing us to open the door, which nearly kills us as the metal boards shoot right past us. We make our way into the room, leading us further and further down, and lastly, we find a strange ritualistic room with a shrine of Cthulhu and a strange red crystal on the statue, on a pedestal, and one right above the door. We also find a tablet that when activated causes the statue to shoot out a red light and reflect off the crystal. So after doing the obvious and aligning all of the crystals, the pedestal crystal glows, and after interacting with it, Hoover comes into the ritual room, telling us to quickly escape before the place blows. The next cutscene only shows the explosion of the Marsh refinery before it cuts to the next segment. If you don't like reading and you just skip past this diary entry, you're left a smidgen in the dark, so I will read it all for you now. February 9th, 1922. Was one big explosion in the refinery. One moment I was running for my life, the next I was face down with a mouthful of dirt. I just hope everything inside was destroyed. What the hell was that thing in there? Some kind of monster jellyfish? How could it move out of water? How could it even exist? My ears are still ringing with the screams of Hoover's men as the acidic slime engulfed them. Despite the casualties though, the raid hit pay dirt. The feds recovered a briefcase with some very incriminating papers. It seems that among other things, the Marsh family, Sebastian in particular, has been trafficking with enemies of the state. He's been offering a contagion, some kind of germ weapon, to the highest bidder. This is in violation of all kinds of international treaties, but that didn't surprise me. Even if the Marshes care about such things, which I doubt, I could well believe that news of the treaties hadn't ever reached Innsmouth. But I know there's more to the story, like that shrine on the lower floor of the refinery, the carvings of those hideous gods, and one more thing that will probably haunt me in my dreams for some time to come. Why did they seem familiar? In any case, the evidence of arms dealing gave Hoover what he needed to bring in the big guns. Literally. Innsmouth is now under martial law. Coast Guard cutter is stationed in the harbour with a company of Marines on shore. Led by Robert Marsh, the surviving members of the Esoteric Order of Dagon are holed up in the old Masonic Hall. I suggested pounding the place to dust with the Marines' artillery and the cutter's guns, but Hoover wants Marsh alive. That's not going to be easy. The Marines who attacked the main entrance to the building went into some kind of psychotic seizure before they could reach it. The brass thought Marsh had laid down some kind of gas in the area, but the gas masks didn't help the second storming party. That was when Hoover remembered a report of an old smuggler's tunnel close by the banks of the Manusect River that was said to lead into the building from below. It seems my good luck just never ends. With so many agents killed and wounded in the refinery, Hoover has decided that I have the dubious honor of representing the FBI in the attack through this secret entrance. In company with a squad of Marines, I have met up with a Sergeant Carter and his men by the refinery gates. Then, we'll set out along the frozen river looking for the tunnel. I may never sleep again. Not that it would make much of a difference. The walking sounds and visions are getting worse all the time. or if they are linked with the events here in Innsmouth. Maybe getting to the bottom of this horror will help me recover my lost memories. We meet with Sergeant Sam Carter, who tells us to follow the Marines into the Masonic Hall. We get chased down to a frozen river and attempt to cross it as the thin layer of ice crumbles below us. Try as I might, this bit took me 10 minutes to complete before I caught up with Private Joe Parker, where we used a flamethrower to get into the basement of the Masonic Hall. We see a vision of something in the tunnels, which after cutting back, the creature drags Joe Parker into the tunnels just out of sight. We make our way into the tunnel, seeing his torn up corpse and a hunched over figure eating his body. Its squid-like head and protruding face tentacles, the creature lumbers towards us slowly, completely blocking our path. We lead it back to the doorway, and after using the flamethrower to torch the beast to a crisp, we're able to make our way in. We find Joe Parker's shredded corpse next to a pile of dynamite, and Jack gives the most emotionless reaction to seeing a torn apart corpse.
Looks like I'm on my own again.
The aliens are
We crawl into the tunnels, seeing a series of old rustic jail cells, each of these with a strange fish humanoid creature, bar one, which has Lucas Mackey in it. We talk to him about all the aforementioned events, but Mackey also adds that the doors are blocked by strange forces and mystic murals, wherein Marsh is attempting to complete a ritual. Making our way back to the hall's back entrance, we see a door infested with a hostile strain of starfish, which if you get too close to, they'll do a slight bit of damage and temporarily block your vision. I wish I recorded my reaction to this for the first time because I completely shat myself. We use the dynamite we grabbed earlier on an old barrel of bootleg rum, which blows up, clearing the starfish out of our path as well as knocking down the doors. We enter the basement of the Masonic Hall, where we see the place crawling with guards. We find ourselves between a series of rooms, finding an office with a safe, and a meeting room with a suspicious bookshelf we can push back to find a hidden passage and a secret door to the main hall. This back entrance allowing us to get the jump on a couple of the Esoteric Order guards. We clear the ones out from both the bottom and the top floor, allowing us to freely explore. We move to the main entrance, seeing the door covered in a mystic force which, as Jack comments, makes his head pound. We make our way through a maze of intertwined rooms before finding a storage room, which at the back has a ladder that allows us to enter the top floor, where we find a room with a shotgun and a winch system. The guards from below see us, and a series of them rush to Jack. Taking them down and exploring the top floor, we find this barren room with a large glowing green archway with glowing green crystals attached. We make our way out and into a smaller room littered with chairs and hear the faint sound of a young girl crying. We also find the diary of Robert Marsh, which reads, "The translation of the tablets is progressing well. Soon, the word of Father Dagon shall be known to us in its entirety, as it is known to those below in Yarnathli. Then, armed with knowledge of the divine purpose, we shall be able to take our place beneath the waves on equal terms, and the grand design set in motion more than 80 years past shall draw towards its completion. Aya Dagon, Aya Hydra, Aya, Aya." Poor Darwin, to be so completely wrong. With higher forms of life, those who return to the sea, not those who forsook it for the land. And in generations to come, as the last remaining taint of human blood leaves our strain, we shall ascend to true knowledge and true power in the love and service of Father Dagon and Mother Hydra. But there is still much to be done before that glorious future is assured. The outsiders could still ruin everything. The one will be sacrificed, but the other who has come looking for him must be dealt with. Innsmouth must remain undisturbed until everything is complete. That which eluded my ancestor Obed on his death in 1878 shall not escape me. If only Sebastian understood things as I do. His science, his meddling in the surface world, how meaningless they all are. Once we take our place alongside the Elder Ones, how small his endeavors will seem. But he has been deaf to the word of Dagon. No matter how I have tried, perhaps upon his return, with the translation so much further advanced, I can make him see the truth. The stained glass in the meeting room depicts Dagon and allows us to break right through it, where we have a ghostly encounter with Ramona. Now in the hall's green room, we can break into another office with a stone tablet on the wall covered in strange scriptures and symbols. Using the diary of Robert Marsh, we get the code for the safe, which after opening we find Mackie's pistol, a scroll which holds a prayer to Dagon, which when translated reads, "In thy name let us behold the Father. From the depths of the waters I come, and from the depths of the deep ones also have come. Hail to the ancient dreams, hail to Dagon." We also find a heavily bound manuscript embossed with the word ponape, an old word for ponpei, which means upon a stone altar, and is also a real-world location, being the central state of the oceanic country Micronesia. The manuscript is a reprint of the one written by Ezekiel Hogue in 1734, describing encounters with a strange cult on the island, in the islands among the Pacific. Hoag claimed the islanders worshipped and even interbred with strange beings from the sea. The manuscript continues talking about sacrifices cast to the sea, jewellery made of gold. Hoag recounts the islanders' tales of fantastic underwater cities constructed with inhuman laws of geometry and architecture. Some legends tell of the islanders transforming into sea creatures as they grow old and going to live forever beneath the sea, the greatest of the deep ones being Father Dagon and Mother Hydra. Hoag stresses that these stories are not tales, but rather fact, stating that he has witnessed their creatures as well as their practices. We see a vision of someone or something chanting and kneeling at a statue of Cthulhu. Now, with the ability to translate the tablet thanks to the manuscript, we're able to read the strange chant on the stone tablet in the office, which I'm not even going to attempt to read this out, but now we're able to use the same chant on the force fields on the door, allowing us to sneak in, killing off a couple more order guards, finding a well, and a lectern with the keys to Mackie's cell. Returning to him and setting him free, we take him to the room with the winch, where Mackie holds up the cover to the well, and we finally descend, finally getting to meet Robert Marsh for the first time, whose appearance is closer to the humanoid sea creatures described in the manuscript rather than human. Robert runs off, leaving us to fight against two priests as a blinding light above the Cthulhu statue forces us back. We dodge balls of fire and take shots at the priests until they fall dead. We find a framed stone tablet on the wall which is broken, the tiles laid out on the ground and covered in strange symbols. Nearly at each of the statues lies a grate with the same wall symbols and corresponding symbols which can be seen on the back of the statues right above buttons. Following the pattern according to the Dagon symbols, the door behind the statues open, where we make our way through the smugglers' tunnels, only to fall through and into the icy waters. Jack's vision goes black as he freezes and drowns in the water, only to be pulled in by the Coast Guard cutter Urania. Jack laments on the fact that he hopes the seamen know where they're going and why. He further laments on his weakening sanity. Captain Hurst discusses our next location, a place called Devil's Reef. He also mentions that the last message received from his men was something about an underwater city and how more old smuggling tunnels on the island will lead us to the cult's stronghold. Hurst and a lieutenant go to his office to plan for the arrival on the island, and we're left briefly to explore the ship before speaking to Seaman Gene Henson, where we see a vision of something at the depths of the water. Whatever it is, it leaps up, attacking another seaman and dragging him into the water before these large, beastly sea creatures jump aboard and begin attacking the ship. We grab a hunting rifle and guard the entrance to the ship. After fending off enough of them, we start to run low on ammo, and Henson tells us to head to the storage room to grab more. We make our way there, finding a large supply of guns and ammunition. Making our way back, we give the ammo to Henson, who's now injured, and we must head back into the ship to go to the infirmary and grab a medkit. After making our way, we see a beast dragging one of the seamen back into the infirmary, where after entering, we see it gnawing away at his corpse before attempting to attack us. Killing it, grabbing the medkit and making our way back to Henson, he patches himself up, and we fight off against more fish creatures until their assault finally comes to an end. A large wave comes careening from the coast of the island, forcing us to take cover and hold on to some metal bars on the ship as the ship nearly flips over. Officer Winter notices some strange lights coming from the reef and tells us to get a better look with the cannon, where we see multiple priests in the distance, seemingly the cause of this tidal wave assault on the ship. Shooting the cannon at each of them, stopping to take cover as more waves collide, we finally stop the assaulting waves. Seaman Willie Thompson calls out to Officer Winter, informing him that the creatures have made their way below deck and that Captain Hurst has locked himself in his quarters, his mind breaking at the sheer shock of these creatures storming his ship and killing nearly all of his men. More creatures storm the ship, and with not nearly enough means to completely defend themselves, we simply follow Winter and Thompson to the captain's quarters, locking every door behind us and firing at the creatures if they do end up closing in on us. Eventually, we find a small bit of safety when one of the doors holds shut. We see a seaman briefly before he's attacked. Winters shoots the beast, causing the ship's pipes to burst, and we find our way in Hurst's quarters, where he's locked himself inside, reciting a prayer before...
Amen.
We're forced to find a back entrance into the captain's quarters now. We rotate back to the large machinery of the ship, where we crawl through the vents into the captain's quarters. As we do so, we see a vision of one of the creatures attacking and killing Officer Winter and Willie Thomas, only hearing panic and gunshots through the vents as they are torn to shreds. We make our way into Captain Hurst's quarters and grab the key to the armory. As we make our way in, we grab loads of ammo and weapons, not before catching a glimpse from the eyes of a creature at the bed of the sea, slowly rising towards the ship. We find a stick of dynamite, which allows us to crawl down another vent, leading us to the mess hall, meeting Seaman Roy Baker. The power on the ship cuts, and we see a vision of one of the creatures attacking one of the seamen. Baker tells us the ship is now running on its backup power, but it won't last long, and asks us to go find a welding tool to fix the ship. We make our way back to the low deck of the ship, grabbing the welding tool and allowing us to return to the main machinery, where after messing with the valves, we're able to weld the pipes back together, allowing us to return to Baker, where he takes the welding tool. We get attacked by another creature, where Baker cowers, leaving him to follow far behind, welding the doors shut behind him. This backfires, where he inadvertently welds the deck's door shut, locking him in with one of the creatures, which tears him into shreds. Suddenly, we hear a deafening growl from the sea, and Dagon himself begins attacking the ship. We use the cannons to fire at him, but he ducks back into the water, anticipating our position on the ship, forcing us to lure him to the front of the ship so that we can shoot him. Doing this a few more times, Dagon seemingly dies, clinging to the ship as he falls back to the bed of the ocean and dragging the ship down with him. We're now approaching the endgame. The Lovecraftian elements are turned up to 100. We see a vision of a strange temple, a book which pages magically flip. The book's words are marked with strange symbols. Jack reads off the words which say,
When our foe moved on land, we would track them by the strange footprints they left in their wake, consisting of 5 circular toe marks. They were blind, yet had exceptional sensitivity to both motion and sound. In battle, these creatures could harness the power of the winds with terrifying precision. It wasn't until the great energy weapon was developed that we had the means to fight their evil. Then we were able to drive them down deep into the catacombs beneath their basalt towers, sealing all routes with impenetrable trapdoors.
The cutscene ends with large swooping shots of the stronghold, seeing its gaping chasms, these familiar green crystals, which fades the tablet we saw in the opening of the game, the same one that sent us spiraling down into this cult's rabbit hole. We see a strange device in the island's waterfall, the large flowing cave rivers as the camera swoops out of the waterfall and onto the shore of Devil's Reef. Jack comes to among the wreckage of the ship, where we get another diary entry. February 10th, 1922, early evening. Did I really see what I think I saw, or was it just another hallucination? I can't be sure any longer. Surely these things can't exist in any rational universe. But then, how could any human imagination, even an insane one, produce such horrors? Why do some of the things, the shapes, the words they use seem so familiar? That's the question that's eating at me. Are they connected to my lost memories? And if so, what on earth happened to me during the 6 missing years? Or was it even on Earth? I need to get a grip on myself and look for any other survivors from the wreck of the Urania. Hope I'm not alone on this hellish rock with these things. I must be careful though. I've seen for myself what they do to unwelcome visitors. With nowhere else to go, Jack braves the rocky shores with the purpose of finally ending this dark chapter of his life. Jack begins to brave the reef, getting hit by some secret traps before reaching the rocky shores, where the heavy wind forces us to cling to the rocky walls and crawl along the thin rocky platforms below us, making our way to a ritualistic platform, which through some visions show us that this is the same spot where the island's cultists sent their sacrifices out to sea, as mentioned in Ezekiel Hoag's manuscript. We find a strange carved disc where after we make our way back past the slippery rocks, we're able to enter a small cavern infested with the hostile starfish. After making our way through, we find an old pulley system, as well as many cave paintings on the walls. One depicts a scene of sacrifice, with 3 lanky figures being hung. Another depicts a human woman pregnant with the offspring of one of the Fishmen. Another depicts humans worshipping the Fishmen along with Dagon, and the last one is a mural with carved shapes out of the wall, perfectly fitting the disc. Placing the disc in, the mural paints a clear picture of the discs being used to summon the Fishmen by casting the discs out to sea. Placing the disc in also opens up a loose stone wall, where after entering we see a hanging corpse, along with a lever and a stash of jewellery. All of these murals, as well as the gold stash, is identical to the manuscript written by Ezekiel Hoag. The crossbreeding, sacrifices, the cult worship, and the gifts of gold jewellery. And as Jack points out, the gold possesses an unusual whitish colour. We make our way further down, finding a hole where we can put the lever in, blocking the pressure plates that activate an instant death trap. Now, this is the hard part. We have to use these small rings to traverse across the rocky shore, all the while heavy gusts of wind push us randomly for a random period of time. This unknowing of when it's truly safe to move to the next ring led to me spending, no joke, over 25 minutes trying to make my way across. I've been cross-comparing my gameplay with long play videos, in which everyone seems to just absolutely book it past this bit, just hoping that they don't get killed. However, I was not so lucky. But anyways, after making our way through, we find a zip line where we can use the pulley system to get ourselves into a small opening on the side, where we find a tablet with a red and green ball. Translating the symbols above the tablet tell us that it's a map, and that it requires a button to be pressed. Turning around, we see the button with a carved slot. The slot shares an identical resemblance to the brooch that belonged to Ruth that we got way back in Innsmouth, the gold of which, again, has an oddish white colour. Placing the brooch into the button and pressing it activates a timed sequence where we're forced to follow the map, getting past the same hostile bug life we also saw back in Innsmouth, and finally making our way into a strange room, where we find a stand that perfectly fits the mysterious red gem we found back in the Marsh Refinery. A large stone door slides open as the crystal glows. We make our way through, finding a large open cavern with nothing of note besides a hole with a strong force of wind. Pushing a rock down, it's clear that the hole is very deep. We jump down the hole, and as we descend, Jack has another vision at the asylum, the most vivid thus far, seeing himself spasming in a wheelchair before the halls and the ceilings are dripping with blood. We see a figure of Jack as hands reach out through the bars. As we get closer, the vision of patient Jack walks into his cell and we see a flurry of tentacles eroding the back cell before the screen fades to white. As we make our way to the bottom of the air-filled tunnels, we begin to plunge ourselves deeper into the stronghold and look through a glass underwater wall, the Coast Guard attempting to take down the compound, but they're unable to due to a force field. We make our way further in, catching Sebastian Marsh entering the tunnels via a portal and speaking to a portal sentry. Sebastian is quick to find Robert and discuss their next plan, hinting at a disagreement where Sebastian wants to focus on keeping the order a secret, while Robert is more focused on his prayers and worshipping practices with the rest of the cult members. We're forced to sneak past the portal sentry, and after sneaking around more, we're trapped in a cage by Sebastian Marsh, who with the help of one of the strange priests, knocks us out and throws us deep into the stronghold's jail. leaving us in a cell with nothing but a chisel. We use the chisel to pry open a grate at the bottom of the cell and crawl through a narrow tunnel to the neighbouring cell with a fishman inside, who seems to be completely harmless. After briefly entering his cell and causing a disturbance, one of the guards will enter and beat the fishman, who is left whimpering and sobbing. Sebastian did mention throwing us along with the other experiments, so it's not too far-fetched to say that this fishman is one of those said experiments, hence his lack of hostility. We slip behind the guard as he leaves the cell. We're now left with 0 weapons, 0 means to defend ourselves. This is probably the most helpless we are in the game. Sure, back in Innsmouth we had no weapons to help us, but now we're in their stronghold, facing against stronger enemies, the highest ranking members among the Order. We're forced to slip past guards as they cover their routes, using any dark spaces and staying out of their line of sight in order to survive. We sneak into a large open cavern, big enough to get a better idea of our surroundings, but also big enough for the Order to see us easier. We explore the open cavern, finding a locked off laboratory where we see a vision of something or someone struggling in binds on a table. We're then forced to sneak right past one of the guards to progress, where we find a sea of these strange plants. Moving past, we find a large cluster of crystals, green crystals, the same green crystals we found back in the cultist manor at the start of the game. There's a singular crystal on its own, however, tightly lodged into the rock. Moving forward, we end up finding a thin, tall subsect of tunnels. The sound of strange wailings can be heard echoing through the compound. Going to the depths, there's a small water-filled tunnel engulfed with the hazardous starfish and blocked off by rocks. Our only way is up, and reaching there, we find a grate where we overhear an argument between Sebastian and Robert Marsh, specifically about Robert ending Sebastian's fishmen experiments before being banished, where Sebastian responds by shooting Robert. Robert then responds by using his power to strangle Sebastian to death. The grate crumbles below us and we inadvertently come face to face with Robert. He's injured and moves slowly when he chases us, but again, magic. He has 3 means of attacking us here. One pulling us forward where he can strangle us to death using his magic, another forces us back, and lastly he's able to hit us if we get too close. We're forced to force him to chase us around the table where we can grab a ritualistic knife and close the gap between attacks, before hiding behind the table and or throne to avoid his use of magic. Sounds simple? Well, it wasn't, considering this mini-boss took me 30 fucking minutes to complete. Admittedly, that was due to the fact I had 0 patience and tried channeling my inner Eshe, trying to close the gap and get as many stabs in. This works terribly though, as Robert can kill you in about 2 or 3 hits, so it's definitely meant to be a slower, more patient fight. Anyway, after killing him, we retrieve the briefcase Sebastian left on his desk, finding a key to the laboratory, making our way out of Robert's office and into this strange temple area, hearing the strange wailing again. We move to the back of the room, finding a hunting rifle. Finally, we have a gun again, and I waste no time killing anything that moves in the tunnels. We backtrack to the laboratory, finding strange, almost living, breathing, and conscious plant life, as well as a weed killer, and lab notes from an Esther Marsh, talking about a plant called the blue tinfiblia, noting the plant's petals having acidic properties and is very harmful to the captives they have in the prison, specifically mentioning one of the things they have down there. Moving further into the laboratory, we find his subject bound to a table, writhing in pain. He begs us to kill him, but not before Jack gets any and all information he can out of him on how to get into the temple. The experimented man mentions only the Order's most loyal followers can enter, but there is an old passage deep beneath the temple. He warns us to tread carefully down there, however, mentioning ancient dwellers in the dark depths and evil from a forgotten time. We're now given the choice to end the man's suffering. From what I know, there's no impact no matter what you choose, but we find ourselves back into the underground prison where we gun down any and all guards before finding our old stash of guns that they confiscated from us. Why they didn't destroy the guns, considering I've been absolutely gunning down any and all members I can, I will never know, but hey, I'm not complaining. We also find some good slop, and after finding the cell to the pet mentioned in the lab notes, we're able to open a back entrance to the cell briefly, but after the creature nearly drags us in, we're forced to nullify it. We are able to open a feeding chamber and give the creature some food. Now this took me a considerable chunk of time to find, but somehow I missed this bright, glowing plant way back in the room before the crystal cluster, plant being that blue tinfiblia. Mixing it in with the prison food, we feed the beast and slowly hear it die. Another thing I want to mention is that in this part you can hear the loud wailing echoes throughout the tunnels, which every time it happens, you're swarmed by these larger fishmen. It seems whatever is making these sounds knows that you're here and is summoning all the creatures it can to stop you. After poisoning the beast, we're able to finally enter the cell, finding a hammer. Going back to the cluster of crystals, we use the hammer, as well as the chisel, to break the small crystal shard free from the rock. Now backtracking back to the jail, we find a room infested with vines and harmful vegetation. Using the weed killer, we're able to safely climb the vines, finding ourselves, as Jack puts it, in a room, one that is strangely familiar. This is the very same room Jack found himself in at the start of the game. The same room that after being stuck in and seeing strange visions of Yithians was in an asylum, losing months of his memories before being shot down this rabbit hole. We mimic what we did way back when, putting the crystal in the holder and interacting with the tablet opposite the well, opening a large portal. Jumping through, we're teleported into the room with the strange device we saw in the opening cutscene, both in the book and lying on the floor. Picking it up, it looks like a wonder weapon from Call of Duty Zombies. This is the Yithian power weapon, easily the best gun in the game. Its attack works by charging the gun before firing, where it'll send out a lethal beam of energy. The more you charge, the stronger the shot. What really makes this gun so much better though is the fact that it never runs out of ammo, and that it never needs to be reloaded, so you're free to spam the thing to your heart's content. That's good enough on its own, but I decided to test and see what would happen if you charged the gun for too long, thinking the device would explode and instant kill me. However, all it does is falter slightly, being unable to fire another shot for a few extra seconds, so now there's no downside to using this. We take the gun to the blocked off water tunnel with the starfish, and after shooting it at the water, the rocks blocking the path explode, allowing us to pass into this deeply open cavern with a tight rocky passage, standing above a seemingly empty abyss. Reaching the other side, the cave begins to shake. This large, worm-like creature flies towards us. Its deafening screams not only do consistent damage that can't be healed with any medkits, but also pushes us away, forcing us to keep our footing and hiding behind some of the stone pillars, mixing in fully charged energy beams to send the creature back to the depths where it came from. We climb some vines and crawl through a rocky tunnel, finding ourselves at the forefront in a large open cavern, seeing a temple in the distance. Jumping out of the tunnel, we hear a loud wailing once again. Medkits sit on opposite sides of the temple's entrance, and as we make our way in, we see a gong, which after shooting an energy beam into, causes our ears to start ringing. We're swarmed by a few priests and some fishmen, before making our way up to the top and facing Hydra herself, mother to the Order. We're unable to take shots at her due to the force field, however. Moving to the back of the room, we see a statue, and behind it there's a small switch which we can flip. Hydra begins to scream and summons some more fishmen to defend herself. Clearing them and getting closer to Hydra, we see 4 more statues around her, attempting to fire a beam of energy at her, but as Jack says, I can't concentrate with that damn thing wailing. This leads us to go back down to the gong and shoot it in order to drown out the wailing, where when we return and attempt to take a shot, we suddenly gain the ability to possess and control one of the fishmen. In this form, we are only able to attack by swinging our claws. However, we're also able to jump higher, being able to reach one of the statues where we can hit the switch on the back. We repeat this process 3 additional times until each of the statues is activated, where with one final charge from the energy gun, we shoot the small puddle of water connected to Hydra, which electrocutes her. She falls dead, the force field gone, giving us the ability to grab the red crystal on a podium in front of her, and now with the red crystal, we're able to recite the chant we learned back in the Masonic Hall and open the door, finally being able to leave the temple. However, as we do so, the Coast Guard begins launching their attack on the stronghold, causing the entire cave to collapse in on us. Fragile flooring to crumble below us. We reach the archway Sebastian had entered through, bearing an identical resemblance to the one found in the Masonic Hall. We recite the chant once more at the podium, and the gateway opens a portal, not even sucking us in, leaving us to jump through on our own, where we fall into the other side back in the Masonic Hall, where Hoover and Mackie are still there conducting their investigation. We fall to the ground holding the red crystal before Jack loses consciousness. He wakes in the strange temple seen in many of his visions, this time stepping outside, where we see a Yithian city, large pillars with fire. Jack looks down at his hands, his conscience being brought into a Yithian. One of the members of the great race of Yith has summoned Jack, with the intent of showing us something. We're teleported into a cathedral, and the great race of Yith tells us of a terrible conflict upon them and their hosts. A terrible war is on the horizons between the Yithians and the Cthulhu's kin, the half-polypus creatures worshipping Cthulhu along with Mother Hydra and Father Dagon. A door on the wall opens, and the same book we saw in the vision as we fell into the Order's stronghold. We absorb the readings from the book, and upon questioning why we're being shown this, the great race of Yith informs us that the cult is still going, thriving in the darkness, and plotting to break free of their bonds, hell-bent on wreaking a terrible revenge. As the great race of Yith puts it, the end is inevitable and very close. Very, very close. Just as Jack asks how close, the cathedral is attacked, and the great race of Yith leads us away as our surroundings crumble. We're taken into a pod to be sent back to Earth, where the great race of Yith explains that this world, Nakatus, and the past 6 years of our life will be cleansed, but the great race of Yith explains that when the time comes, Jack will remember fragments waiting in the shadows of his dreams. In a state of confusion, Jack asks what exactly he needed to know, to understand. The great race of Yith asks Jack about his visions, where Jack mentions having nightmares that came with the territory, sometimes helping with the cases. The great race of Yith mentions that nightmares are never accurate and that Jack is different. It brings up Jack's father also dealt with similar encounters, suicide being his only way out. When Jack asks what his father has to do with this, the Yithian explains that he too was brought into Nakatus, the Yithian being the transferred mind, the one who used Jack's father as a host, making this being Jack's Yithian father. When Jack questions, his Yithian father admits Jack is not Yithian, but also not completely human. Jack is left in a total state of confusion, but with no time to explain, the room collapsing around us, Jack's Yithian father sends us back. We cut to Jack in his cell, haunted by these things he saw, images of Ramona appearing. Jack slowly steps onto a stool as the doctor makes his rounds, making it to Jack's cell just in time to witness Jack hanging himself, where we see the twisted writings of Jack's last diary entry, and Jack's life slipping away as the doctor calls out his name. We hear Jack's heart rate slowly fade, sounds are going mute, and we're finally left with Jack's final diary entry. Suicide note, February 16th, 1922. Now, at my end, I can fully see my last case opening in me a new fear, a real fear, a fear of myself, of what I am, and what I have always been. All that I was is now lost. Hope, purpose, pleasure, all meaningless. I now walk in the shadows between worlds.
And it is there I have finally glimpsed upon what lives in the dark corners of the earth.
This game has been a wild journey to revisit. Over the past year, I've decided to start focusing on my channel a lot more and focusing specifically on long-form content. Hell, this video was actually meant to be my third ever long-form video. Making this video has been an absolute roller coaster. I started working on this video way back in like mid to late 2023 with the intention I'd get it out during the Halloween season. It's been weird going back to the earlier stages of this video to rewatch and make sure there hasn't been any editing mistakes. Seeing the opening in Chapter 1, which was made in 2023, and Chapter 2 was made like mid-2024, with the rest of the video being made from like the start of this year. Since working on this video, I'd say my perspective on making content has changed heavily though. The reason I first held back on this video way back in 2023 was because I saw a couple other YouTubers had made videos on this game, and I was a little insecure and worried that I'd be seen as a copycat, but that's the deal with making videos on YouTube. You can't truly have an original idea. As long as you make it your own and have fun making the video, no one has a right to claim ownership over a game, book, movie, or TV show. And besides, the reason I wanted to cover this game so badly in a long-form video essay is not just because I love long-form content, but because this was the first horror game I ever played. Way back when I was really little, I used to play this game at my nan and pop's house, who owned an original Xbox. I remember playing many games on the original Xbox at my nan and pop's at like sleepovers and that, and one day my pop rented this game from Video Easy. Shout out to anyone who remembers Video Easy, by the way. But I remember being at a sleepover at my nan and pop's in a house pretty far out and desolate, late at night, extremely dark, the only light in the room being from the TV, seeing the horrific imagery and themes of the game. Of course, I don't think I ever got too far. Hell, I'd be surprised if I made it past the opening. Nevertheless, the Lovecraftian elements stuck with me. The game stuck with me. And since, especially after falling in love with making and watching long-form content, I've been dying to relive those memories, finally being able to put this game at rest, and making this video to share a game that was a core memory of my childhood. This game isn't one of the classics you hear being brought up when people mention old horror games, but I think it deserves it. The game perfectly encapsulates Jack's descent into madness and the gritty, grimy Lovecraftian feeling perfectly. The story is both captivating and interesting, and found myself many times rooting for Jack, even if you know the story only lives as a tale of what led to Jack taking his own life. This game currently has a very niche community of love and support for it, but even then I still highly encourage anyone who's a fan of Lovecraftian-inspired horror games, psychological horror games, survival horror games, retro horror games, or just horror games in general to check it out. It's less than $5 on Steam, but be warned, the game comes with many issues. I hope this video has shed enough light on this forgotten hidden gem of the horror genre. Sure, the game is a very loose adaptation with the whole ending with Yithians being absent from the book, and sure, the game has problems, but so do most games in general. I think this game has somewhat stood the test of time and still holds up as a tense, fun, suspenseful psychological horror, and I can't recommend it enough. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've stayed this long, I'd really appreciate hearing your thoughts on the video in the comments below. I'm always looking to improve my videos, so if you have any form of criticism, please leave it in the comments and I will read it. I love making these long-form video essays, and while my upload schedule doesn't really show it, I really want to dedicate more of my time this year to working on projects covering things that interest me. So if you like this style of long-form content, please consider subscribing. My future plans are to do more videos focusing on things I like, such as books, movies, TV shows, and maybe some other games. I also started a second channel where a lot of my old and
G'day folks, I'm GOG Novo.
admittedly cringe videos are there to watch. I'll also be streaming and uploading some more casual videos on there on a regular basis. But for now, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. The love and support means the world to me, and I hope you have an absolutely gogtastic day, and take care.